Welcome to session number 5. Here we go. 5. Only one more left. But in session number 5, I want to remind you again that as we get into this and we talk about these battles, that testing is a common part of everyone's life. Even though, again, most of the time people are totally unaware of it. I mean, let's face it, there's no announcement that this test is coming because tests come in the form of problems or life circumstances or everyday situations, but they are tests. And how well we do on these tests affect where we go in life from here. So as we come into these tests are a part of life for the purpose of proving us. So we've talked about a number of them up to this point, and we've talked about the test of small things. Can we handle more? And we've talked about motivation. Are we doing the right things for the right reason? We talked about credibility. Can people rely on you? Can they count on you? Can they trust you to deliver on the promises that you've made? We talked about the wilderness test and the question it poses, that are you ready to make the change that progress requires of you? And then last week we talked about that testing, if you will, of authority. And that is, do you respect and appreciate the authority that God has put into your life? Now, again, I say that question because those questions always follow the test. With every test, there is a question that must be answered. And so today we're going to get into our next area called the warfare test. And what the warfare test asks is this question: what is your adversity quotient? You need to look on the screen to see how that one's spelled. But what is your adversity quotient? Let me explain it this way. I'll make this statement. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. Does that help? That's adversity quotient. Not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. For example, on a scale of 1 to 10, how quick do you give up? How quick do you end up saying, "Uncle"? When adversity emerges and challenges stand right in front of you, Goliath stands right there in front of you and says, "Send me a man to fight." Do you hide with the rest of them inside your tent and shake? Or do you grab your slingshot and say, "Let's go after it. Bring it on, big guy"? What kind of fight is inside of you is the question that's being asked. What kind of fight is inside of you? If you're watching a boxing match, you will see winners whose faces are disfigured by the punishment that's been dished out by their opponent, okay? You get to see this guy on TV after the fight, and sort of hearing a cut there, and a lip hanging there, and the ear out to there, and the kind of, but he won the fight, See, everyone who steps into the ring will eventually get hit hard. And if you're afraid of getting hit, you'll never be a champion. When it comes right down to it, we need to understand what it means to always try to outsmart your opponent, but don't run. I remember, as far as growing up, Dad saying, you don't run away from a fight. But don't tell your mom I said that. Don't start it, don't instigate it, but don't run from it. Don't turn around. You make sure you finish that, but don't tell your mother. When we get into this, what I want to explain here today and what I want to go over is the fact that you have 3 kinds of battles you will be challenged to fight. They are a spiritual battle, mental battle, and life battle. That's spiritual battle, mental battle, and life battle. We are all called to fight battles in these 3 dimensions in life. So let's take a look at them. First of all, I want to talk about the spiritual battle and give you this understanding that in the spiritual battle, the opponent is not a human being, but a spiritual force led by a spiritual being that is opposing God's will and plan for your life. That spiritual being in the spiritual battle is opposing God's will and plan for your life. I don't know if you, well, I'm sure you do remember the movie The Passion of Christ. Huge movie, wonderful movie, made a number of years ago, but still such an important film to see every year as far as I'm concerned, at least one time a year. And it's interesting because you can understand with a film of that magnitude and that power that the enemy did not want that film to be released. Now, what's interesting is, as I ran across this article from the Assist News Service. It was back in 2005 that this report was made. So, and it's still on record. If you want to go ahead and Google it in there, you can pull this report up for yourself. But it was released. It released this story concerning John Debney, and John Debney, dealt with music and a lot of other things, but he has written things, been an Oscar winner for Best Original Score on all sorts of different films that are out there, from Liar Liar and Bruce Almighty and so forth and so on. But listen to some of the things that's said in this report, because it really brings home what I'm trying to tell you as far as a spirit opposing the will of God for your life. Now, it basically says that that in an interview last year, Debney told ANS how composing this extraordinary score turned out to be a battle between good and evil that he had never experienced in some 20 years of Hollywood. He said, "I don't think I will ever be given the opportunity to write again for a movie as powerful as this one." He goes on to say, "I was stretched every which way but loose. I was stretched by Mel Gibson. I was stretched by the guy upstairs, and also I was stretched by the guy downstairs. What it did was completely strengthen my faith, and I have realized something very interesting. I had never before subscribed to the idea that maybe Satan is a real person, but I can attest that he was in my room a lot, and I know that he hit everyone on this production." Debney said that the battle he felt with Satan as he wrote the music became really personal between us. He went on to say, "I had all these computers and synthesizers in my studio, and the hard drives would go down, and the digital picture that lives on the computer with the music would just freeze on his, Satan's, face. Then the volume would go to 10, and it would all happen all the time. The first time it happened, it scared me. Once I got over the initial shock of that, I learned to work around it and learned to reboot the computers, and so I would just, start mumbling against him. But there was one day when I had been on the movie for about 4 months when it really became bad that day, and a lot of things that were causing doubt in me, and I had had enough. The computers froze for about the 10th time that day, and it was about 9 o'clock at night, so I got really mad, and I told Satan to manifest himself. And let's go out in the parking lot, and let's get it on." It was a sea change in me. I knew that this was war. I'm not a physical person, but I was really angry on this occasion. And he goes on to talk about different things that were taking place. And he says, he goes on to say here, he says, well, what's funny is that he was up on the second floor of his building are therapists, and they see therapists until midnight, and their windows are right at the parking lot level. And he says, I was coming downstairs, and I had it. I had booted everything down and saved it, and I was walking downstairs, and I was verbalizing. He says, I was saying to Satan, manifest yourself now. I'm walking out, and come on, let's get it on. He's talking to himself, get it on. And he says he realized that people were looking at him, and I realized how silly I must have looked. He didn't manifest himself, but I wished he would have, because it changed for me after that. Now, his life was changed by that film and by that understanding. Now, this kind of story might sound new or maybe even strange to you, but and you might even sit there and be a little cynical of the reality of spiritual battles. But I'd like to say to you, this really is nothing new. I mean, this is not a new battleground. In fact, in your book there, the Apostle Paul in Ephesians states this. He says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand." You don't find these kind of direct strategic attacks as the norm on people's lives, okay? It's more the exception than the rule. When such a thing as the passion of Christ takes place, I can see that. There would be a huge spiritual battle there, but never ever take for granted that it's a reality, and always understand that there are some battles that you're going to have to fight through prayer. There's some battles that you're going to have to fight, and some strongholds that can come down in your life only when you pick up the shield of faith. There are some things that can only happen if you know how to draw out the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God, and take your territory and stand your ground, and realize that if there is a God at work on earth, then it's quite obvious that there is an evil enemy that is at work on earth as well. And whether you know, and whether you ever know exactly how the strategy really works is not important. I just want to remind you that the good news is, in the end, you win. In the end, you win. In the end, you win. This is not something the believer really should be worrying about. I get so frustrated when I see believers all wrapped up in understanding the enemy and dealing with the enemy, and the enemy this, the enemy this. Friend, number one, I wish they would get as much energy put into who God is, and understanding who their God is and who they are in their God. And understand that we are not on the defense. We are the offense. The devil don't have the ball. We've got the ball. We're not trying to stop the devil. The devil's trying to stop us. It's the fight in you to do the will of God. Greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. Oh, I like that. Boom, ba-boom. I'm sorry, I get excited about this because that's the truth. You are a child. He's in you. You are on the off. You've got the, okay, let's go on. Let's go on to number 2. You've got the spiritual battle, now you've got the mental battle, which is dealing with the opponent there is doubt. It's despair. It's discouragement. Every thought is contrary to faith, to faith in your life. Every thought is contrary to faith in your life. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5 there says, "Bring every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ." To obedience of Christ. A number of years ago, and I'm really seriously about thinking about reviving this teaching on mind invaders, if you remember that correctly. And the main theme to understand in mind invaders is that you can't have a positive life with a negative mind. It just can't happen. You cannot have a positive life with a negative mind. Negative about life, negative about relationships, negative about your finances, negative about this. It can't happen. In fact, in Philippians 4 there, it says, "Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there's any virtue and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things." See, it's the place and time where you got to say, I won't be discouraged. I am a child of God. Yes, I do make mistakes, but I get right back up on my feet again. Yes, I'm going to be hit with discouragement, but I'm a child of God. I am going to make those, I'm going to have those thoughts, but I'm going to get right back up again. And let's get into that third one, which is life battles. You've got the spiritual battles, the mental battles, as well then as life battles. Now, life battles' opponent is called life's circumstances. In other words, hardships that are part of life on this planet. Hardships. You know, I call them the lightning bolts of life sometimes. When, you know, when out of the blue, all of a sudden, boom, this thing happens. This breaks down. That goes awry. This person turns on you. You're dealing with winds that are blowing the opposite way that you want to go. You're going this, and all of a sudden, there's a shift. There's another message that I spoke on a number of years ago. It was called If Trees Could Talk. Now, you're going to find that the best, strongest timber, trees, do not grow in a valley where there's no exposure to the elements, where there's no severe wind, so forth and so on. Where you're going to find the best timber is where you've got rough weather that builds the strong timber. I mean, we've got a tree in our backyard. It's an amazing tree, the growth that it's gone through in just the past couple of years. But it was a tree that was over at my daughter's house that sat protected up against the house. It's a little scrawny thing, never got very big, never branched out very much. And they were wanting to clear out their area there, so they did. They cleared these out. They took out some of these trees, asked us if we wanted one. Said, sure. I go up and I plant it in the middle of the backyard where it's exposed to everything that's out there. And as a result, the wind came, it beat, the elements came down on it. It went through some severity as far as winter and some other harshness. It went through dogs in the neighborhood, a few other things along that line. But can I tell you, that thing has tripled in its size because of being exposed to rough weather. It had to become strong in order to survive. Imagine yourself living in a house, and God comes in to rebuild that house. At first, perhaps you could understand what he's doing because he's dealing with this and he's dealing with that. And then he is getting the drains different and corrected, and he's stopping the leaks in the roof and so on. And you knew that those jobs needed to be done, and so you're not surprised at those jobs. But presently, what ends up happening now, he starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts, and he does not seem to, and just why is he doing this? What on earth is he up to? The explanation is that he is building quite a different house from the one you thought of. He's throwing out a new wing here, and he's building an extra floor over there. He's running up towers, and he's making courtyards. You thought you were going to be made into a decent little cottage, renovated. But what he's doing is building a palace. That was written by C.S. Lewis. See, what I want to do today is to challenge ourselves. Self, don't forget, life is filled with testing grounds. Prove yourself. Pass the test. Get the promotion. Advance to the next level in life. God is for you. You can do it. God is for you, and you can do it. I'm looking forward to our next session next week. Our last session, session number 6. I look forward to seeing you then. God bless you. Until then, understand the spiritual, the mental, and the life battles that we all walk through and come through victorious in Jesus Christ. God bless you.